Hi, I'm Tony Russo, and this is In Case You Missed It from Kates-Boylston for the week ending Friday, March 7th, 2025. We'll get to the news in a second, but first, a message from our sponsor.
Funeral service is more than a profession. It's a calling. Starmark understands the care, dignity, and efficiency you need to provide for the families you serve. That's why we specialize in sensible product solutions designed to meet your needs. If you're looking for sustainable, economical, and efficient container and casket solutions, Starmark is here to support you. Because presentation means everything, you deserve a partner you can trust. Starmark, the cremation solutions leader. Visit starmarkcp.com today and discover the difference.
First up this week, I want to talk about the most recent and the first roundtable that we've ever done. It is up, it is available, and it is absolutely worth watching. It's about an hour long, and we have 4 brilliant succession professionals talking about what you need to do if you're thinking about retiring ever. Not if you're thinking about retiring in 6 months or a year. The succession process is a plan. And, you know, these are people who have not just a lot of experience, but they have a lot of stories about people. You know, it's for people my age, there was always, if Woody had gone right to the police, this never would have happened. There are so many stories of people who just had a disconnect between what they thought was going to happen when they retired and what actually happened when they retired. And this is an opportunity to hear some great insights from some really, really bright people and get a couple connections for people that you want to see. You will have to sign up with an email address to be able to watch the video, but the video is free and it is not behind a paywall. And there's a link to it in the show notes. I can't recommend it highly enough. It is, I'm not going to give too many spoilers because I'm going to use a lot of what I spoke about yesterday to write stories in the upcoming couple of weeks. One that'll probably be out in 3 weeks is about a gentleman who just stopped fighting with one guy who wouldn't come down on what he saw was a gratuitously overpriced facility and just opened a different one in town that he bought from someone else. So, think about not just what you want, but find out what your business is worth for real. And there's all sorts of complex things. So I want to kind of suggest you take a look at that. And the other thing that I want to point out for subscribers coming up on Thursday in the Funeral Service Insider newsletter, we have another great article from Steve Lang, who's going to talk about how Preneed companies make their profits. And it is, he says it's very low level, but he's a very high level kind of guy. It was really eye-opening to look at the kind of questions that you should be asking your Preneed advisors about how they make their investments. Because when you get a Preneed advisor, when you have a Preneed partner, they have to be in business long after most of your current families are dead, right? That's the point. The point is that they are not that they're stable for now, but that they're stable forever. And you want to be able to ask about some of their investment questions and make sure that you feel safe entrusting them with your family's money, and that also you're going to get the best deal for your own business and not be kind of caught in the middle. So those are 2 things that are coming up that I don't have links to. Actually, I'll have a link to the Succession thing in the show notes. I won't have a link to the Steve Lang column, but I do want to kind of prick your brain on that because that's worth waiting for, and that'll be out next Thursday. So I watched, and there's a link in the show notes, a news report on alkaline hydrolysis in Indiana. And the only thing that even made me click on it was that it said alkaline hydrolysis has an uphill battle in the Indiana Senate. And I figured I would check to see what the uphill battle was. I think that just is a word that people use. They did not say in the story how it's an uphill battle. I looked, I couldn't find any other, there's always some, religious nut who, says that there shouldn't be alkaline hydrolysis, but there wasn't anything to indicate that there was an uphill battle. So hopefully there is not an uphill battle. It passed handily in the House, as we reported here, and it's now in Senate committee and expected to come to a vote before the end of the legislative session. Let's see if that happens. You should click on the link. It is Sam Sieber, who you may know of the alkaline hydrolysis company BioResponse, kind of takes everybody through the process. It's a really kind of in-depth for television. Anyway, look at alkaline hydrolysis in a 2-minute or 3-minute television spot. And again, there's no evidence presented that it's going to have an uphill battle, but I've seen several news pieces recently about alkaline hydrolysis passing or coming up for a vote in Indiana. So my hope is that it's just pressure mounting to keep the anti-alkaline hydrolysis people quiet, or at least minimize the amount of damage that they can do as this comes up. Indiana seems to be excited to be the 29th state, and as I said, I would be so happy to report on that. Whatever happens, though, we are going to keep following it as we go along. And as I said, there is a link to the story that I watched and some that I read in the show notes. Speaking of alternative dispositions, there was a story last week about a funeral home in Delaware, it's not far from me, that talked about how they offer natural organic reduction. Now, natural organic reduction is illegal in Delaware, as it is in many states. Most states, I believe it's still illegal. But what this funeral director did was tell the story about how people can prearrange to have their remains shipped to someplace where it is legal. And I thought it was a really savvy way to start the conversation. People know that you can get buried in a casket, and people know that you can be cremated. And as things like NOR and as things like natural organic reduction and alkaline hydrolysis become more popular, or at least enter the zeitgeist, it's an opportunity for funeral homes that don't have it or where it's illegal, like Delaware, to talk about how if you pre-plan, you can still have this thing you want, even if your government doesn't think enough of you to allow it in your state. And I mean, they don't say that, I say that. But it's a good way to get people thinking about pre-planning. And when they come into pre-plan, that can be the discussion. I just thought it was a novel idea for this funeral home to say, no, we don't offer natural organic reduction, but we kind of do, and here's how it works. So there's a link to the story in the show notes. The story is behind a paywall. There's really nothing very much interesting in the rest of the paper. I actually can pick up a physical copy of this paper and tell you for sure it's not one you need to, get. But the idea is stick it in the back of your head, because if someone calls from the press to ask about natural organic reduction, you don't just have to say, no, we don't offer it, or no, it's not legal in this state. But yes, we do offer it, even though it's not legal in the state. And here's how that works. And now all of a sudden you have a story about transportation in the news, and you have a story about planning and pre-funding your funeral in the news. So it's a real opportunity if it presents itself. I recommend taking it, and you can probably make it present itself with a little ingenuity. So this is a story that I've reported on before. I'm just really more following up than anything else. There was a funeral home in Cobb County, Georgia, that about a year ago burned down. And a little bit after that, there was a little bit of a scandal about what happened to the Preneed money. There were some families that were complaining that they didn't get their hands on, that they didn't get any refund for their pre-planned services. And the owners were, and I think remain, unavailable on that point. But the funeral home had already been in foreclosure when it burned and was up for actually auction. So it had been closed for a while, and somebody went in to, do one of those YouTube spooky mortuary story videos and found a bunch of human remains, as almost always happens in those types of videos. They sneak into the place and they find a box of remains, or they find an old urn or things like that. And I really wanted to use this story as an opportunity to, again, kind of challenge the way that, local regulatory, whether it's a funeral board or it's the state health department or whatever, think about funeral homes closing, because I don't think that there's a funeral director listening or watching who says, a funeral home was foreclosed on and abandoned. Well, I'm sure there are no cremated remains in the basement. I mean, of course there are. There always are. And someone besides a YouTuber should be the one to find and disperse them. And it's something just to keep in mind when you're thinking about how, funeral boards operate and some of the things that they should be responsible for. I think if a funeral home is foreclosed upon and is up for auction, if the owners have disappeared, I think the community would do well to, help make arrangements for whatever unclaimed remains are left behind. The alternative is, and there's a link in the show notes, a big splashy story about how the place was filled with remains and everyone got their money stolen and all of these awful things happened. A lot of them, the money stolen thing, I think we probably all know, if it was a legitimate, Preneed policy, families were able to get them someplace else. But finding them and running all of those things down is difficult and takes expertise. And I'm certainly not blaming the community around this particular funeral home so much as I'm suggesting that if somebody's foreclosed on and a funeral home is going up for auction, someone's got to check to see if they're cremated remains. And now, because the list is out now, they finally have the list after 6 months or so of which remains are still there. And, there's people have started picking them up. There were 57, if memory serves, from the story that I read. Anyway, there's a link in the show notes, but it's something worth considering, especially as we have another funeral home body mishandling allegations arising in Illinois. And this is from a crematory that is actually participating in the quote investigation, unquote. There were concerns about the storage facilities outside and whether, I guess, again, this was a news team broke in and saw that there were bodies wrapped in plastic, and maybe they were able to see some faces of the deceased in these containers. And this is a central kind of place where funeral homes from all over the region ostensibly bring their bodies to be cremated and then returned to families. And so now there's kind of a vague panic in the general area, like what funeral homes are working with this place and where is grandma now? The fact that the funeral home's cooperating suggests to me that, if the bodies weren't covered up sufficiently, I don't feel like they were unrefrigerated containers. And this is Chicago, this is the dead of winter, Illinois, outside of Chicago, the Chicagoland area. I don't think that is the issue. I think that it's going to end up being 63% miscommunication and 37% bad luck. So we have a link to that in the show notes, and feel free to follow along as that story develops. Hopefully it will turn out to be a non-story, and I will report on that next week. As a matter of fact, now that I said that, I wasn't even going to include that, but there is a non-story that I would like to report on right now. In Washington State, there was a bell that was stolen from one of the cemeteries there. It was a replica of the Liberty Bell, and it was stolen from the, I want to say the Evergreen Washelli Cemetery. And it's worth more than $100,000. And I was going to report on that, but then I saw this great picture of this old traffic guy who saw a truck with a suspiciously large lump on it and looked under the tarp. And sure enough, there was a Liberty Bell replica. So that crime was solved faster than I could report on it. So it's kind of a non-story. Still, there's a link in the show notes because it's, every now and again, it's nice to have a couple of fun stories to report on. And certainly this is one of them. And finally, a story that it's a good story and it's a nice story, so I wanted to report on it. But it also is a little bit of a reality check. And the fact is that the public doesn't know that cremation rates are on the rise. And recently in Seward, Nebraska, a funeral home was the recipient of a $250,000 donation, a little bit more than that. And didn't know what to do with it. So they went to the local funeral director and they said, we have this money. What's the best way to spend it? And the funeral director said, build a columbarium because cremations are up. And it surprised everyone. I mean, there's reporting at the meeting, and I've put a link to it in the show notes. And they said of the funeral director, Doug Wymore, Doug reported to us that there has been an increase in interest in cremation. So yes, that's kind of why we went this route, is what the town clerk and city treasurer told the newspaper here. I think it's cool that they were like, oh, really? Cremation's happening more often. We should maybe consider expanding. But anyway, they have a brilliant columbarium. And you can see a photo of that and a link to the story in the show notes. And I mean, and good on them for doing it. It's just, I just got a kick out of the way that it was reported. Just like, oh, apparently cremation's on the rise. Who'da thunk? So anyway, yes, link in the show notes. And that will do it for this week. In case you missed, it is a Kates-Boylston production. It was written and edited by me, Tony Russo. Please subscribe wherever you're listening now. If you're listening on your computer and would like to listen on your phone, we would love it if you did so. Just go to the podcast app of your choice, type in Funeral Service Insider, and you'll be able to subscribe to this same feed on YouTube. Same thing. You can go to the Kates-Boylston YouTube page and just hit subscribe, and you'll get notified whenever we put out any of our videos. Obviously, this video, I don't know if it's obvious to you, it's obvious to me. This video comes out every week, but we have other ones that will come out as needed. And again, let me strongly encourage you, no matter where you are in your funeral service career, to listen to this or listen and watch this great roundtable discussion that we did on Succession. It was just really kind of a free-flowing conversation among people who had a great sense of where the business is and where it's going. And we hope to do more of these roundtables. So keep your eyes out for those in the coming weeks. And last but not least, please, I know that you heard Tyler Anderson on Wednesday talking about the Funeral Service Business Plan Conference, April 1st in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. There's a link to that in the show notes. And the next couple bonus episodes, we'll be talking with people who are speakers at this event, and they'll be giving you a little bit of an insight about what they're going to be talking about as a temptation. But if you for some reason skipped the Tyler Anderson episode, it's worth seeing because we talk about more than just what he's going to talk about. And I really treasure your time, and I don't want to waste it if I can help it. So you're not going to see a lot of very promote-y stuff here without also making it worth your time. And, Tyler's a great speaker. That was easy. They're all great speakers, and it'll be easy to have fun conversations with all of them going forward. But until next time, you have a great weekend.